Alrighty, the day of the Georgia runoff is finally upon us. I think that this is going to be sort of the forgotten election because not a lot of people really care about it. The enthusiasm on the right was blunted, I think, on the last, on the day of the last election, not even in the days following, on the day of, because things really did not go the way that the right had hoped. There was not the usual pendulum swing against the sitting president's party. Joe Biden, it turns out, is one of the most popular presidents in American history, and you just can't take him on. At least that's what we're led to believe. That is the official narrative. But for all intents and purposes, it is true. That is what the results bear out. The official results, as they have gone down in the history book, shows that the GOP massively underperformed and the Democrats massively overperformed, with the exception of a few certain locales. But in general, the Dems did quite well this November. And by all accounts, in Georgia this December, they're going to do even better. Herschel Walker, it is generally expected, will lose by even more than he did on the initial election night, the first round, so to speak. And this sort of goes against the historical precedent in Georgia, which is that if an incumbent senator from Georgia is forced into a runoff, he loses in every case except for 2008, in which you had a substantially higher turnout of black vote in the November election, because Barack Obama, the first, the man who would become the first black president, was on the ballot, and just not as many people turned out for the runoff because Barack Obama wasn't on the ballot. Other than in that case, every time the incumbent senator from Georgia loses in the runoff. But since we have essentially a new electoral system here in the United States, in the post, in the new normal era, in the post-Wu flu world, I don't think that a lot of the old records really apply anymore. We have different modes of voting. We have different levels of security, to put it mildly. I mean, look in 2020, all the bellwether counties in the country, for the most part, maybe there was one or two exceptions, but of the known bellwether counties, I forget all the names of them. There's one in particular, I think, in Indiana that always shows up early in the night that people like to use to forecast what the rest of the night is going to look like for the election. Trump won all those real big, and then he ended up losing in a landslide in 2020 to the man who would become the most popular president in American history, Joseph Robinette Biden. So, with all that said, I think that Herschel Walker clearly is fighting an uphill battle tonight. I do wish him luck. I think that it would be interesting if he won, because if he won, there would be a 51-49 Senate for the Dems, I believe, at that point. Although, you know what? No, maybe it'll be 50-50. No, I can't remember now. I haven't thought about this since the last election, but I'm pretty sure since Fetterman won in Pennsylvania, that was the only Democrat flip, which would have made it 51-49 as it stands if all the other incumbents won, which I believe they did. I don't think that there were any other seats that flipped other than Pennsylvania. So it should be 51-49 as of now, which means if Walker wins, it would be 50-50 again, which is just the status quo that we had, of the last 2 years, in which the Dems would still technically control the Senate because they would have the tiebreaker of Kamala Harris. Okay, so according to Wikipedia, which I know, not the best source, but I think on something like this that, it's a good enough resource, the Republicans currently have 49 seats, which means if Walker won, it would be 50-50. Now the Dems, it's a little more confusing. It says the Dems currently have 48 because they're not counting Warnock, because Warnock's election hasn't been decided yet. And then you have Angus King and Bernie Sanders, who are both technically independents, but they throw their weight to the Democrats as far as the majority goes. And Bernie these days, I mean, he's completely indistinguishable from a Democrat. Bernie used to be somewhat independent. No longer, not since 2016, really. So if Walker wins, Joe Manchin will again become the most powerful man in Washington. Although, if Walker loses, if Walker loses and the Dems have a 51-49 majority, old Joe Manchin, who is up for re-election in 2024 and is very unlikely to win in West Virginia as a Democrat, considering that West Virginia, a once deep blue state, is now a deep red state, he might start to get squirrely. I think that he might pull an Arlen Specter and just flat out cross the aisle because he thinks that he has better chances running as a member of the opposite party. That's what Arlen Specter did. You remember his famous last words, "I didn't leave the Republican Party, the Republican Party left me," in that disgusting, slimy voice he had. Well, Joe Manchin, not only would he improve his prospects in 2024, particularly if he decides to run for governor of West Virginia again. I believe he was the governor before. Very unlikely that West Virginia elects any more Democrats statewide. And so Joe Manchin, if it's a 51-49 Senate and he doesn't hold this pivotal role as sort of like the keystone of the Democratic majority, well, then he could switch sides and become just as important as a Republican as he was as a Democrat. Or he could just pull the independent thing, like Bernie, and instead of caucusing with the Democrats, he could caucus with the Republicans and make it 50-50 again. But then again, since there isn't that VP tiebreaker, as the 50th Republican, Joe Manchin would still not be as important as he is currently as the 50th Democrat. Nevertheless, I do think that Joe Manchin has to do something before 2024. And so even if Walker wins, Manchin might pursue the same course anyway. So with that said, I wish Mr. Walker luck. I think there's certainly worse Republicans in the Senate than him. So I wouldn't hate to see him elected. I would prefer there to be a little more balance. It's not so much that I want the Republicans to have power, it's that I don't want the Democrats to have absolute power, or really any power. I don't want either of them to have any power. So if they're, fighting each other and they got gridlock, I think that the years under Obama from 2010 to 2016, in which there was gridlock in Washington and the Republican Congress didn't let him get much of anything done, I think that those were some of the best years in Washington. There wasn't a whole lot of terrible stuff that went on during that time. Bad things happen when either party has the freedom to do as they wish, because they never do anything good with their power. And that goes for Republicans, too. What good things did Trump get done in his first 2 years? Oh, we cut taxes. Okay. Tax cuts, they're fine. I'm not bothered by tax cuts. And, if anything, they're either, neutral to good. But everything else that gets done, terrible slop. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.